the trajectory of this missile does suggest it was heading in that direction. It flew over Syria first, but which is just to the southwest of this part of Turkey. Not entirely clear that that was the target. It could have been heading on further west, possibly as far as Cyprus to the west coast of Turkey.
Well, fears of further escalation increased today after NATO air defences shot down an Iranian ballistic missile heading towards Turkish airspace. That was confirmed by Turkey's defence ministry today. They said the missile had been engaged and neutralised by NATO air and missile defence assets. Let's speak to Richard Spencer for The Times, who's in Turkey near the Iranian border. Evening, Richard. Thank you for being with us. What more do we know about whether Turkey was targeted intentionally or not? Are you with us, Richard? I've just lost connection to Richard Spencer there. That's The Times' Richard Spencer at the moment is in Turkey. And we'll try and connect through to him. But it could mark a major escalation if, of course, Turkey, a NATO member state bordering Iran, was intentionally struck. It brings another dimension to this conflict. Richard, I think you're back with us. What more do we know about whether this was an intentional strike or not by Iran?
Well, the Iranians say that they are only targeting US interests. That's true in the Gulf as well, though we know their missiles have struck quite widely, and their drones even more so. And of course, intercepted missiles and drones can land anywhere. This was a missile that fell, it has to be said, near the Incirlik air base. I say near, I mean within the vicinity of, more broadly, which is the major US base in eastern Turkey, a key base for the whole NATO alliance, which dates back to Cold War years, because the old Soviet border is not too far away from where I am, as well as the border with Iran. Incirlik is somewhat further away to the west. But I'd say a major base. The trajectory of this missile does suggest it was heading in that direction. It flew over Syria first, but which is just to the southwest of this part of Turkey. Not entirely clear that that was the target. It could have been heading on further west, possibly as far as Cyprus to the west coast of Turkey. Not entirely clear where it was headed, but certainly it's concerning to Turkey, which has been left out of this fighting so far, and has been much friendlier to Iran over recent years than the rest of the Western alliance. So.
What is Turkey's?
Stay out of this.
We've not got much time with you, but just briefly, Richard, if you can, on Turkey's position in this conflict. How's the Turkish government responded to this, and might we expect Turkey to get dragged into this? Is there any appetite there from them for that?
Certainly very little appetite. It's in a very sensitive position, of course. It has a border with Iran, which is where I was today, and it sees itself as a sort of escape valve, I think, for a lot of the Middle East issues. It hosts many refugees from Syria, as we know. It doesn't want to host another large refugee population from Iran. It doesn't want to see Iran destabilized. It doesn't want to see, for example, one issue that's being discussed, a Kurdish uprising in western Iran, given that it is trying to deal with its own Kurdish problem as it sees it, a long-running campaign by Kurdish guerrilla groups in the east of the country. And in general terms, it's suffered a lot from years of civil war in Iraq and Syria, which it has borders with, doesn't want to see another civil war in its border. So, yeah, it's really desperate for this all to go away, I think.
Look, Richard, thank you so much for being with us. We do appreciate your time. Richard Spencer, at the Times correspondent, currently based in Turkey. Richard, thank you. you. Let's head to Beirut now. Israel's bombardment of Lebanon has killed 72 people since Monday and driven some 83,000 more from their homes. That's what Lebanese authorities said today. UN peacekeepers said earlier that Israeli troops had entered several towns and villages in southern Lebanon. There's a massive evacuation notice in place there. And Hezbollah has claimed an attack on the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, in Lebanon. So the first direct clashes with Israeli forces in southern Lebanon in this particular conflict. Let's speak to Nada Homsi, who's a correspondent in Beirut for the Middle East newspaper National News. Nada, good evening to you. Just describe a little bit about what is going on around you and the level of concern in Beirut and in the wider area of Lebanon.
Yes, in terms of what's happening around us in Beirut, in Beirut proper, we hear the occasional sound of airstrikes. In that way, it's very familiar to the last war between Hezbollah and Israel between 2023 and 2024. But in terms of how people feel, I think that there's a lot of anger that Lebanon has been dragged into a war at a time when it's supposed to be in this post-war reconstruction period. Like you said, there's been tens of thousands of people that have been displaced. Today, the Israeli army ordered that everyone in South Lebanon leave. That's 250,000 people that are on the road, stuck in hours and hours of traffic as they leave their homes and aren't certain about where they're going to stay. So for the first few days, even before this evacuation order, there was already a displacement crisis with the government opening schools and shelters for people. And even despite that, we saw a lot of people that are still sleeping in the streets, in their cars. They pitched tents, in addition, of course, to staying in the shelters, with neighbors, friends, wherever they can find. And those people now are in Beirut. I think that was just an airstrike. I'm not sure if you heard it because it was a low sound.
Okay. Well, if you need to go, please do tell us. Okay. Well, your safety is our priority. So carry on until you need to go. Please do.
No, it's okay. So in Beirut proper, it's very rare that we have the airstrikes, although Israel has, as of the last couple of days, expanded the scope of its operations. So this morning there was a strike in a suburb that's not within the quote unquote like Israel's typical area where it strikes, where Hezbollah typically operates. It's a neighborhood called Dahi. Instead, it struck in a Christian neighborhood, and it struck in several areas across Lebanon that are outside of typical Hezbollah areas. So there are they're all civilian areas. Even Dahi is full of civilians.
So it's basically striking outside traditional Hezbollah-controlled areas. We know that much of the south is controlled by Hezbollah. There are southern districts in Beirut where Hezbollah has a significant presence as well. I think that many people assumed Hezbollah was no longer a mighty force after events in 2024, of course, after the October the 7th attack. Can you give us a gauge on that? What can Hezbollah withstand? How much can they fight back? I mean, obviously they are a prescribed terror organisation. No one wants anyone to be fighting back, but I just wonder how long Hezbollah can protract this for, really.
I think that's the question on everyone's mind because, as I said, Lebanon's been dragged into this war yet again at a time where it thought that it was going to have this relative peace and stability. Hezbollah is a notoriously secretive organization, so it's pretty hard to tell what its capacity is. But we do know, of course, that in 2024, Israel led a devastating campaign against it, killed its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who was later replaced by Naim Qasim, and all of its top leadership was decimated. Basically, the group was decapitated, and Israel also went after all of the missiles capabilities as well. So in terms of what kind of weaponry Hezbollah has, there have been estimates made that up to 75% of those weapons have been destroyed, but we also don't know in what capacity Hezbollah has been rearming itself. And they're notoriously excellent at fighting in the wilderness. So right now in South Lebanon, they're clashing with Israel. And I believe there have been reports of several Israeli soldiers that were wounded.
Yeah, direct contact.
Yeah, but this is all in addition to the fact that there's a Lebanese campaign now that was happening throughout the ceasefire period to disarm Hezbollah. It had supposedly disarmed south of the Litani River in South Lebanon. And now we're seeing that those weapons are back in the south and they are fighting.
Yeah.
But how long they can sustain it, we don't know.
Nada, thank you so much for giving us that update. Please do stay safe. Nada Homsi, correspondent in Beirut for the Middle East newspaper National News.